Hey guys, George Mesa, Third Eye Edify podcast. And it's been a while since I've had an interview, and I am very excited to have my guest, Saul Luckman, here. I found him on Substack, or potentially he found me. As a matter of fact, I saw that he liked something of mine, and I started looking at his stuff. And he's putting out tons of things, multiple things a day, all kinds of different concepts, spirituality, self, and a lot more. I don't want to pigeonhole his work. He seems to be touching a lot of different topics. I asked him to be on, and he said yes. It's a beautiful thing. We barely know each other, and I genuinely appreciate that. I think that's what this space is all about here. And the where it all came from is I saw he posted a meme of, I'm better than you because I read more books than you, something along those lines. And I think about that a lot, having written a book, having read so many books, and we're talking to someone who's now released multiple books here. So I'm very curious to see what his thoughts are on this topic. I hope to find a few avenues he's never found in an interview before, and we'll see how that goes. But everyone, please welcome Saul to the show, and thank you for being here.
It's an honor, and thanks for inviting me, George. I really appreciate it.
Sure, sure, of course. You want to, give people an idea of how it all started, especially the book process. Did you start as an author? Did you move into it from something some other avenue?
Oh God, yeah, that's a good. How far back do you want to go?
Well,
Are we
you
talking
find
about
what's
the
appropriate.
psychology here? Actually, let's do that. I'll share a story from my memoir. It's an art memoir, so it's got about 150 of my paintings as well as about 24 or 28 chapters
Wonderful.
from the years I spent in the Low Country in South Carolina, living on this little island. And the book is called Musings from a Small Island. And it kicks off with a scene from my very early childhood when I was staying with my grandparents. And I was awoken in the middle of the night by this hooting sound. And I went to the window, and it was a very dreamlike, surreal experience. And there was this gigantic, it certainly was to me, I was a little kid. I don't know how big it really was, but it looked humanoid. It was an owl, an albino horned owl, a great horned owl sitting
Wow.
right outside the window against a moon. And it was so strange that that is when in a way my artistic career began, because I was exposed to something that changed my perception, and I was aware that it was changing my perception, and my perception was being held in a way that it had never been held. And it would be years later, when I was in graduate school, I was reading about Russian formalism and modernism, and there was this philosopher from the 20s and 30s named Shklovsky, Viktor Shklovsky, and he wrote about this concept called estrangement. And for him, the work of art, if it was truly a work of art, would have this quality of estrangement, by which he meant it would make the act of perception longer and weirder so that it took it out of the normie mindset. And I had that experience very, very early on. And in this book, I also write about power animals and how they can kind of come and go over the course of your life. And that's where you get crow rising, is that for many years, my animal was crow. And then I had a tragedy that I write about in this book that kind of traumatized me in a way that sent crow flying, and then condor came in. But I think my very first power animal was owl, and it was in that tree.
A superb owl indeed. That
Yeah.
is a very cool story. And I find that very often in this space, people that, I don't, it's impossible to say one thing, but people that do the kinds of things that we do, there's a before and after, and some moment, usually something random, not some trauma, just some random moment, just some random glimpse at something, or maybe it was a small piece of a dream that turned into a little deja vu, which is actually what happened for me. I was maybe 5, and I was having a regular dream, and my dreams have always been very present. And I know you've spoken about lucid dreaming, and it wasn't part of the dream. It was just a very quick flash of my best friend who lived next door scraping his name into the concrete steps of his neighbor, which is where our bus stop was. And this was 3 seconds, maybe. And the very next morning, it's exactly what happened. And I didn't realize he was even doing it. He was just sitting there. And that changed my perception of my reality and my whole world. And it made me think about everything differently from there. I just knew there was something more than simply the physical manifestations that our eyes create. And that, yeah, same thing, just a random, nothing good, nothing bad. And but it's so precise that something told me that how did you see this so precisely,
Yeah, nothing like a little precognition to shake up your worldview.
Indeed. And maybe that can kind of kick us into the topic here because I want to speak about books. And I, as I told you before we started, that normally I would have purchased and read at least one of your books before having you on, and that did not happen. I'm sorry, but I see that you have some really cool stuff, and I'm looking forward to it very much to checking out your work. But um, as I was getting older, maybe closer to 2000, maybe just a little past that, actually, 2002,
That's
2003.
old. You're over 2000.
Hey, I'm big time here.
You must be an inner alchemist.
You better believe it. I'm hiding my age real easy. My skin doesn't crack. Um, I used to read lots of bass. I'm a bass guitarist. That music's what I do. I've been teaching since the 20th century, and I perform plenty. But it's not always the kind of work that can pay what I need sometimes. But it is what it is. And I would read lots of bass magazines, and I read lots of video game magazines. And there was this transition in the two main magazines that I read that said, "Hey, you can get us on your phone or on your computer, and you can have this digitally for cheaper." And then they started reducing the size of their physical magazine articles that I would get in the mail and say, for the full article, go to the website.
Yeah.
And I tried it. And the moment I transitioned to getting a digital copy of the bass guitar magazine, I didn't even read more than 10 pages. I just stopped reading it. It was nothing to me. It was kind of like it was flaccid. I don't know what other word to use. It didn't work for me.
Yeah.
Um, how different do you think, if we can start here perhaps, how different do you think it is holding the physical book and being with it versus a digital copy, a facsimile, let's say?
I mean, that's a really great question, especially with the way things are going right now. And I have to confess that for quite a while, I've not read as much as I once read by a long shot. I've really gone much more internal, and I've been trying to hear what my own inner guidance is suggesting that I tune into. So that's been its own process that's been very, very valuable to me. But when I do read, very often it's on Kindle or in an ebook format, or I listen to an audiobook or video of some kind. So it's been a while since I've read a lot of paperbacks, but I have had an interesting little string of paperbacks recently that I've really enjoyed. I read um, Miguel Connor's The Occult Elvis not too
Hmm.
long ago. It's a new book that came out this last year, and I wrote a review of it. He has the Aeon Byte Gnostic radio channel on YouTube. It's very
I may have heard of him. Yes,
and
yes.
so you can read my review and see our interview. And he's interviewed me multiple times about different books of mine.
Cool.
And that was really gratifying. I think Inner Traditions put out that book, and it was just the paper and the feel and the smell, and that really reminded me that oh my gosh, this is really valuable to have the physical thing, but it's also not always practical. So it's difficult, and it depends on why you're reading it. I guess in some ways, are you
Mhm.
reading it to just get some information that you need very quickly, or are you reading it to have kind of a literary experience? In which case, I suggest a good strong espresso and a nice little cafe and a hard copy of the book.
Right. Right. Very, very well said. And I'm not going in the opposite direction. I was thinking a little bit more about that as I was writing the outline here about let's just call it convenience versus practicality. I'm stuffed. I have all these bookcases and I have boxes of books. There's a few of them are my music collection, which is a very, very, very large thing that you got to have paper sometimes for that. I don't think the digital works best there as far as practicality. But as far as having to read a physical copy of the book, I find inspiration through the holding of it. but I don't think that the ritual changes in any way overall for me personally. As a matter of fact, if let's say I have some 19th century German philosophy book that I'm trying to research with, I'm very thankful that there's a search feature. And I'm very thankful that there's possibly, a new set of translation notes, or you can get a different version of it, or something like that. And it's really, really convenient for a lot of things. Sometimes I'll just be putting sticky notes in books and doggy ears, and then I'm telling myself, what am I doing? What is this? I don't know if this is the right approach. It's easier for me to be here. I got a computer here. I got a computer here, and regardless of that, do you personally feel? I'm just curious. Um, do you feel a sense of a need for it as a human being, a need for this ritual, this almost meditation to have any, in any form, a book and, to read the whole thing?
It's interesting we're having this conversation because I realized recently that I've written so much over the years. I've been publishing for quite a while and written in different genres, nonfiction, fiction, humor, and there's just so much of it. And I realized I was missing some of the own threads of connectivity in my work, and so I began going back and reading some of my books, and I was reading them in paperback. And it's weird when you've gone a really long time without getting into your own work. It can have a feeling of as if it were written by somebody else. And in a way, I suppose it was. It was a very different me every single time.
Good point.
But some of the stuff I had just forgotten, and even plot elements. I'm reading my novel, Tally the Destroyer, right now.
Right.
And something happened last night, and I'm like, that's really cool. That's a really cool motif. Or I just didn't expect that. That was really surprising. And that was surprising to be surprised. It's
Yeah.
like that Wordsworth poem after he finally experienced joy again after the death of his daughter. It's called Surprised by Joy. And he was
Mm,
just surprised by the emotion that it could even exist in him. And I was surprised to feel that special something with regard to a book again, which I honestly hadn't felt in a while. And for it to be mine was just icing on the cake.
that's something that, it's hard to explain that because I imagine you may also have this. I have a lot of friends that they don't refuse it, but they aren't creative, even though they are, because when you talk to them, you can see it, the spark, and we all have it, no question about that. Um, but some people, they either are stuck in a situation where they don't have the opportunity, or they'd rather just come home and open a beer and watch TV all night and not do anything else.
Yeah.
And they don't get this with the thing that we're talking about. They don't get to look back and realize that it's important to catalog yourself in much more than just a simple memory. These are catalogs of ourselves, and like you said, it could be a different self each time, which is potentially the greatest reason to do it. It's one of the main reasons I started, pressing record. I I feel completely compelled to do it, and I also sense that even if one person, the usual, even if one person is watching and feels something from it, that's really worth it for me. But I also sense that there's so much more change that's been accelerated lately that I think it's great to see people like yourself discuss it live technically and just, move through your books, move through your posts, and they get to sit back and have a different perspective for once. And it's amazing to me how few people seem to do it now. Even just write a simple journal or anything. It seems to be almost, it's as icky as math was to your typical student back in the day for some people, and I'm surprised by it actually. I'm surprised at how bad handwriting has become. I mean, I sent you a quick thing before. It wasn't my top-notch handwriting either, but handwriting is on the decline. Spelling, due to phones doing it for you, everything is just seems to be moving away from the creative in this particular sense, in the writing sense.
Absolutely. I had a ritual for years. I kept a journal, as a writer. When I went to college, I studied creative writing as a kind of minor. It
Mhm.
wasn't really a minor, but it would have been had the school offered minors because I took enough classes in it. And one of the very first things that we were, uh, well, were required to do was to begin keeping a writer's journal with
Mm.
writer's notes and that kind of thing. And the journal that was used to as an example was F. Scott Fitzgerald's, and it was just a loose collection of jokes and observations and descriptions and plot ideas, story ideas, character concepts, that he put together. And it's hilarious at times. It's absolutely hilarious. Like he has a recipe for, you know, whiskey, whiskey and turkey or something like that. And it's basically like take a large turkey and mix up an old fashioned on the side or something like that, and then baste the turkey and then slice it up and then throw the turkey in the trash and drink the whiskey.
Oh
This guy
God.
was so good at what he did, and I didn't do that justice. But so the journaling became this, ended up sticking with me for years and years and years. And then at some point in time, around the beginning of my career as a father,
Yeah, right.
yeah,
Of course.
journaling became less important. But soon after that, I started painting very seriously, and I did that for well over a decade, and I still do a little bit. But that became a kind of journaling, and I can look back at my paintings in the order that they came in, and they tell their own stories. And then I know people can do the type of thing we are talking about with photography. They can do it with podcasts. They can do it with whatever creates a kind of record that they can recognize, and hopefully other people can see that temporal record, so they get an idea of the sequencing of all of this. I mean, you can look at all of your work kind of jumbled up in no chronological order, and it usually doesn't make nearly as much sense as it does when you see it as a story.
A very good point. And very often, the ones who are studied the most over the centuries, they often get an early, middle, and late period for these reasons. You can sort of get a better sense of what the same word might not mean the same thing in a book from one of these people, for example. It might mean something totally different to them if Nietzsche was near death or right early in his writing. Schoenberg as a musician is completely, average sounding at first, and then it turned into flipped the music world on its head and removed tonality. You never know how much you can learn just by understanding the history of the person before ever looking at the art. And this is a big, it's a time consuming process. But if you want to ingest it the right way, this is a call for that. I'm glad you mentioned that. That's really cool. And again, I'm excited to check out some of your work. And I normally would have by now. I feel bad, but everyone, please do go check out the Substack. Though he's constantly posting. It's great. It keeps things entertaining and fresh for the day. Um, and having said all that, right? I want to mention two things real quick and see maybe if you've heard of this or have a thought about it. Where this idea of a medicine cabinet theory, where you have all these books around. Why do you have all these books? And I'm like, why is your medicine cabinet completely stuffed and you don't use any of that stuff? You just have it for the moment that you need it. And books can be that, Kindle or not. It's whatever format. Sometimes you just need to read. You just gotta get your eyes moving and just kind of do something that's not driving or scrolling or whatever. And another thing that I've come across a lot, especially looking at the past, everything before, let's just say like 1900, just to put a solid number on it, is there seems to be a big problem with translation and a big problem with altered versions. How much of this have you come across in your own readings?
When you say a big problem with translation, you mean the problem of translation as,
Yeah,
as an art form?
yes, especially if I get a translation and it rhymes perfectly, there's no way that works in the other language too. You know what I'm saying? And you can just assume that something was done to bring you the quality of it, but it's never, and then there's all the cultural things that you might not know about it. It's hard to get, you still, I think you should still read it no matter what. I'm a big proponent of that. Read it. Find out whoever you want to find out about. Read the story you always wanted to read. But in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking about how if I could read this language pure, would this come off completely different?
You know, in my latest book, it's called Get Out of Here Alive. It's about inner alchemy. I tell the story of living in Paris in the 90s and being very obsessed with Jim Morrison and the Doors.
He was
During
buried there, right?
Yes, he's buried there. He's buried in Père Lachaise Cemetery. And my girlfriend at the time gave me a bilingual copy of The Lords and the New Creatures, which was his first volume of poetry. And I read that over and over. And it was really cool because it was bilingual. So you had the French, the English original, and then the translation, not done by Morrison, done by
Mm.
a native French speaker, into French. And comparing those was such a fascinating activity. I ended up doing that with Rimbaud and a bunch of other poets where I looked at, I read these bilingual translations and I found that to be fascinating. And very often I felt like I was reading two completely different poems. I mean, not even that related to each other, to your point that there can be a lot of slippage in that. And then I also have had the experience of having some of my own books translated and into languages that I have some knowledge of, like Potentiate Your DNA is in Spanish and it's about to be in French. It's already been translated into French.
Wow.
And but I just haven't published it yet. And that was also really interesting too, to see how the translators kind of altered uh, my ideas, or it showed me back aspects of my work that I hadn't seen that way. It wasn't like they were intentionally trying to mess it up or anything like that. It was just, oh yeah, translation. I mean, but then you get into the larger kind of almost like epistemological question of what is meaning and how is meaning conveyed, and are we ever actually heard when we say or write anything? And sometimes I feel like the answer is, absolutely not. Andre Gide, the great French writer, said, everything has already been said, but since nobody was listening, we have to say it all again.
I'm gonna say it. Yeah, yeah. That's a definite. If you can think of it, the chances are that you're not the first one to think of such a thing. Um, and oh, I had something I wanted to add to that, but I guess what I was first of all, wow, that you got to read a translation of your own book, and that's so cool. To get this like brand new perspective. I think that's incredible. And on the other side of that, I've noticed that there's several authors that they choose to write in Latin, and I don't know if you have any perspective on this. I have a feeling you do. Do you think perhaps that they're making it harder to access? Are they keeping things secret so they don't get in trouble? Are they making it so that only the select few that they want to read it can read it? I've noticed there's so much of that, especially again in the German stuff and some other writings of the past. How much of that have you come across too?
I'm plugging my system back in, so my volume's a little wonky for a second.
Oh yeah,
The
that's fine.
are you talking about recent books being written in
No,
Latin?
I mean older
Yeah,
things for
older
sure.
stuff. Yeah, well, I mean, it was kind of the lingua franca,
Right.
for a very long time. So people were writing a lot of different types of texts in Latin, a lot of the medical texts from the Middle Ages and Renaissance period are in Latin. Like if you go to, I spent a year studying in Montpellier when I was an undergrad, and that's where the oldest medical school in Europe is, maybe the world.
Wow.
And their library is full of Latin texts, of course. So obviously there were different conventions. Now the lingua franca is English. That's what
Right.
that's what we've got going. So I know I mean there are of course writers, um, very good writers who are can be intentionally opaque and abstruse, like Thomas Pynchon or Borges, or the list goes on and on. There's just so many of them, but I think they probably all have their own reasons for doing what they're doing, and that there may be no similarities in the um in the rationale there, but occasionally I do think that there are some people who just want to sound smart, and so
Right.
it's sort of the name dropping and
Yeah.
the language dropping, and then But at some point in time, it's okay, if you've got the credentials, if you can flex, or if people assume that you're flexing when you simply talk about your life, which happens with me sometimes. It's too bad that I posted a meme recently. It was like, I the secret to being happy is basically just to not listen to people who don't want you to sparkle and make sure you leave a trail of glitter wherever you go.
Mhm. I like that. I think I saw that one actually. Now that you mention it, yeah. But you're right. It's about it. It could be a flex. Sometimes you just, if you're in that line of work, you just, it's just the way it goes. Like with Frankar, like you said. What about this Descartes? He had that humongous book on anatomy. Was that originally written in Latin? Do you happen to know?
I
But
don't I don't recall. I don't
I feel
recall.
like that would have been in
It's
the
pro- it,
university
it's
that you were.
it's highly likely it was in
Yes,
Latin. Yeah.
right. Yeah,
Uh,
right. It's not just Southern Europe. It's a lot of Europe, and it's incredible that that happened.
Because the
Um,
whole cogito ergo sum, even the famous quote for Descartes is Latin.
right,
So that means it was taken from a Latin text. You
right.
can just bet he was writing in Latin.
Yeah, there's a very good chance, especially with the nature of his just like all of them, they could draw these unbelievably precise things about anatomy and insects, humans, um, geometry, anything. They were incredible at that too. So the chances are, you're right. The chances are very good. No, no question, no question at all. So now, you actually answered one of my outline points early on when you were saying that you're reading less now. Um, it feels very important to do that in cycles. For example, I read way more about 4 years ago, way more books per year, and then I'm limiting it to, what am I reading for my next episode? What do I need to know about? Am I trying to learn some other thing? Um, it it comes in waves, and to read, let's say 40 books a year, it might be, if especially if they're not just fiction and just kind of relaxing fun. It feels like the load might end up being a far less of a greater return if you don't take the time to process and turn it into something of a sine wave in the way that you take in a ton of information. Or do you feel like you're there, or you have pushed yourself, you're past the point where, and I don't even want to put words in your mouth, but where do you find yourself now? Is it a cycle, or is it just a new era?
I have a feeling it's a new era. A lot of what I'm writing about these days is ways to unclutter your life and unclutter your thoughts, and also to free yourself from the thoughts of others. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of mimetic desire,
No,
but this
actually.
is I think it's Rene Girard who wrote on this topic, and essentially it is a thesis that posits that the way the world is controlled, the way that people are controlled, is that they are taught to desire what other people desire. So if I have a lot of money and I can do advertising or write books or publish those books or choose the authors that I want to publish if I'm a publisher, and then I can put those out there and make it seem really cool, even if it's anti-human garbage.
Hmm.
And a lot of people will desire what is in that book, that they will desire that world, and they will end up creating that kind of Hunger Games reality if it's a dystopian novel, for example.
Right. Yeah, I believe
So,
that.
so we are chained to much of the things that we've read, and I would say that a large part of the whole frigging Western canon, is not very good for the mind and for mental health, to be completely honest. I mean, Lord of the Flies, anyone?
Right. Right.
So, it's a bit of a minefield. So for me, it's very important to begin thinking critically about whatever we're reading, and to realize that there can be many agendas in the most seemingly, prosaic and harmless texts that they're very dangerous in a way. What was the uh what was the Harry Potter moment when, Voldemort says, it's amazing what damage can be caused by the a book in the hands of a young girl or something. sort of a reflection in some ways on exactly what I'm talking about in a different context, fictionalized context, of course.
Right.
The other piece of this is that in the alchemical inner work that I'm practicing and teaching, it's got a lot of shamanic elements, and one of them is this idea of not doing
Mm.
and of not doing the things you always did, not being in the same ruts and patterns. And for me, as a scholar, an academician, going way back, that was my shtick. So for me to not do that is a major not doing, where I process the world not through the kind of telescope or microscope of texts, but with my own eyes and my own experience. And I make up my mind based on my understanding, not my understanding of something. I know GNO. I don't know KNOW.
Right. Right.
And this is really important because books are about knowing KNOW. They are not about knowing GNO.
Yes. And I am under the impression that the word knowing is really just the word king. And very often kings kind of dictate everyone else's reality, and that's not a good thing. Almost always, I would say, I would dare to say, and I completely agree that it's very easy for a book to potentially push you to want things that, either you didn't know you needed or that you don't need, but now you suddenly need it. And in another respect, I always think about the young child being handed a small book like, you should really read this. And then they're going to read it and they're going to focus on being that way, even if it's impossible for them at the time. They may even desire it for the rest of their life. And it can be negative. And this is there's this huge, in my mind, there's this huge split of, you know, doing my best. I personally felt like I wasted a lot of time. I was supposed to be a cubicle slave. I was supposed to be some, programmer type person. It was exactly what my generation was being pushed into. The computers were looking amazing. The, video games were everywhere, and they were keeping me away from reading more. They were keeping me away from doing more things that I could have done if I wasn't playing video games all the time. I really did spend a good amount of time. And then I kind of I made it become music instead. Slowly but surely, I ended up spending more time doing that as I was becoming professional. But then that was what got in the way of me doing anything else. I missed my friend's wedding because I had to go play a wedding, for example, and things of that nature. And I've been trying to catch up, and I felt that I've had much less time for things like entertainment, even though they often show us a lot and they do bring us things. It feels so cheap to see some of it sometimes. I'm just trying to stay away. And that's why I've been avoiding most fiction unless I know it has, deeper meanings that I want to find out about. I've been avoiding the fiction and just taking in the all I possibly can and, see what they're saying 300 years ago with astrology, see what the philosophers were thinking, see what was going on in Germany in the 20th 19th century and stuff like that. And I try, and I'm being as studious as possible in making sure that I don't just latch onto something, believe it, and then I can skew my vision of everything else from there. It's not the kind of thing that you are really told. You're just sort of you're just thrown into this very agreeable category of, I can learn, I can read, I'm going to be, like the meme says, I'm better than you because I read so much. And it's potentially giving people false truths, and very cultish. Like you had mentioned recently, it's a very cultish thing, and that makes me wonder. I had read very recently, in my latest episode was about the Mystic Test Book by Olney H. Richmond, which is something I think you'd find some interest in. That he claims that the original Bible is a deck of playing cards, 52 plus the Joker, no written words, symbology, nothing but symbology. Where do you stand on that? As far as I'm just question after question for you today, but I think you have a lot of really really wonderful perspectives on things.
Could I
Yeah,
could I share some perspective on what you were saying just
yeah, yeah,
now?
yeah, yeah. Absolutely,
I
absolutely.
mean, and I'm happy to entertain your next
Yeah,
question,
of
but
course, of course.
this really was going off for me as you were talking. I want to propose, and I propose this in a lot of my work, that there is no such thing as a distinction between fiction and nonfiction.
Mm.
We live in an observer generated construct. We don't we don't believe it when we see it. We see it when we believe it. Therefore, the idea that fiction cannot deliver the goods on a deeper level, I think is I don't know. I'll just say that it's kind of like intellectual cultural programming in a way. I think it's actually the opposite, that fiction is the real doorway into greater gnosis, and that nonfiction is usually an impediment to it. So,
Oh, I
and
agree. By the way, keep going, but I agree.
so, I mean,
I'll
in
keep going.
support of my point, I mean, I will just offer a few interesting quotes here. Um, this is Neil Gaiman, for example. There are people who think that things happen in fiction do not really happen. These people are wrong. And then Albert Camus, fiction is the lie through which we tell the truth.
Mm.
Ken Kesey, but it's the truth, even if it didn't happen. G.K. Chesterton, literature is a luxury, fiction is a necessity. Richard Bach, if you will practice being fictional for a while, you will understand that fictional characters are sometimes more real than people with bodies and heartbeats. And I could just go on and on and on. And this type of thought process goes way back to my literary roots and the first book I wrote that I'm just about to publish this coming year on my Substack. Finally, after all this time, I'm going to publish the whole massive book. It's called Beginner's Luke, and it's rooted in a kind of like humanistic metafiction.
Mm.
It's not this idea that because everything is meaningless or we're creating everything that we live in some kind of nihilistic world. It's the idea that this gives it meaning, this gives it power, this makes it useful to the creative mind.
I love that. I love that. And I've been, I've taken in more fiction than most people I know, in book and movie and video game story form and all that. And some of the best stories are told this way. And just getting a story can really inspire you. And I merely was alluding to the fact that I was trying to find all of the other side of things that I completely avoided just to see what was there. And very often I found, and I did my best in my own book to kind of avoid this as best as I possibly could. Of course, you can't possibly avoid it completely. These books, I would read an entire book from some philosopher, and then I was wondering, who was this book written for exactly? Most people can't really read this and get much out of it to begin with, and then it kind of like throws you in a certain direction, almost to lead you in a cultish way to one, finality of thought. And I that gave me the icky feeling sometimes that I didn't really like too much. And but I just wanted to see. Everyone's talking about this, whoever. What is this person really saying? I read Hegel's book. Is that the Hegelian dialectic really his whole thought process? The idea of, animal attraction. Was that, oh boy, sorry about that. Looks like, I don't know if you can hear that or not, but my every time we open the oven, this is exactly what happens in this house.
No, I can't
St-
hear it.
oh, okay, great. It's being suppressed perfectly, the smoke alarm. So you it's I still want to read and see, you know, you hear the term over and over again, some term that just keeps getting thrown around over and over again, but no one's ever read anything from the person who they're quoting. No one knows anything about them. So that's what I was trying to avoid, not knowing anything about all these things that are being regurgitated constantly. But in, let's just say Never Ending Story or something like that, there's just so much worth, and there's a way to almost find your inner child, which is very easy to lose, and I think worth keeping. I'm sure you do too. There's a lot of things that only fiction can do, because it is much like one of the quotes you said. It is under the veneer of a lie. Albert Camus, you said it was, who said that. Um,
I,
it's
I forget who said that particular quote. Um,
But yeah, that's I completely agree.
Fiction is the lie through which we tell the truth. Yep.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
And so many times, how often are we finding, let's just blanket term predictive programming. It's very clear, it's very real. And I don't call it that for a conspiracy sense, more that it's funny how all these things are suddenly true out of nowhere, and they were, predicted in a book, even though it's not a matter of prediction at all. Whether they're, you know, using some kind of scrying mirror or some way to find out things that haven't happened yet, or maybe it's a dream like mine was with my friend scratching his name. Information comes through in fiction that would almost not be permitted in nonfiction, and if that makes any sense.
Well, in terms of being able to say it and get away with it, fiction is the ultimate tool. Satire is related to that, how you can satirize things and do it to, tell it slant, as someone once said, and that will kind of work. I wanted to just, we're on this subject. Before we leave it, I think it's important to kind of touch, sort of drill down here a little bit. It's this idea that we've been talking about that I was getting at in my book, The World, Cult, and You. And chapter one of that book is be mindful while cultivating your interest that you don't find yourself in a cult.
Mm,
Um, and what I have to say there are just a few lines, just so that people know where I'm coming from and how it relates to this discussion. The only way out is in. Focusing on externals, however noble the intention, is just an intended distraction. And and you know, I say this, and this is the last thing I will read in this. That's just one sentence. In this thoroughly mind manipulated world, in this realm literally produced by thought installations that create reality tunnels, a sad but true term, your own interests can and will be used against you. So this is back to the idea of mimetic desire and what is actually corralling the sheeple in the way that they are allowing themselves to be corralled and divided and conquered.
right. And it almost they want it. People seem to want it, at least, or at least they think they do. And this could be a part of it too. The focus on externals is huge. And after the thing that happened about maybe almost 6 years ago now, I thought that there would be a much grander, more culturally embraced change away from, you know, alcohol, drugs, and sports entertainment and gambling. I thought these things were going to be a little less favored after that. And I assume in some circles they genuinely are. But right before I moved from New York, I had left a music store that I was the manager for, and I needed some kind of work before I left. And my wife's family owned a few restaurants, so I got to be a bartender for a bit. And doing that, I saw that exact group of people doing that exact thing every day, and I was slightly surprised. I shouldn't have been that surprised, but it didn't disappear this need for mindless entertainment. Fiction is great, especially when it's done well. Doesn't have to be a movie, doesn't have to be a show. It can be a book. I think some people have lost sight of that too. But the the heaviest level of fiction is, to me, just if you stare at, much like the very, very beginning of my book, actually, if you stare at a group of people, you stare at them while they're watching the Super Bowl. It's just they're in that same, like, trance like state as you would be at any holy building. And they're just sort of entranced by this thing. And you can't wait to see the commercials. And as a young kid, it's fun. And then you realize that you're over 40, and all of your friends that aren't in line with this thinking, they're still have that exact, youthful mindset. They haven't found anything new. They're into all the same things that I was into when I was, 8. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but to find nothing else, the whoever you want to call it has done a good job of keeping people very young minded. And it led to, in my opinion, this death cult of, double income, no kids. What, you're going to just poison the world by having kids anyway. Just go do whatever you want to. You'll have, money. You'll have no restrictions. It's going to be great. And it seems to come right from that, from just ingesting nothing but sports. And as soon as you get home from work, it's time to party every day, and
Well,
plenty of dessert too.
well, Virginia Woolf, a
Ah,
self that goes on changing is a self that goes on living.
perfect, perfect. Well said.
Thank you, Virginia.
I remember I found out who that was because of Rocco's Modern Life, that cartoon you may remember. Um, the mom's the his friend was the big cow heifer, and he had two wolf parents, and one of them was Virginia Woolf. So I think that's how I found out about who that was actually.
There's also the famous play Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and that was made into a movie with Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor.
Oh, are
Very,
they in that? No, I
very,
never saw.
very, very intense.
Oh, nice, nice. Yeah, I will definitely be checking that out. There's something of a, there's a strange kind of not improv, but first take goes. And as a musician, I'm all in for first takes, even if there's mistakes. You do the same thing 5 times in a row, and suddenly it's losing something.
Well,
It's not
this is how Godard filmed Breathless, right? They basically just did unrehearsed, unscripted, single takes for practically the entire movie,
hmm,
and it revolutionized cinema.
right, right. Everyone's like, "Oh, this is nice." Like, yeah, but it's no
This
kidding.
is fresh. This is
Yeah,
real. This doesn't sound like or seem like I'm watching a play on my screen.
right, precisely. And I actually wanted to add that point. Or you were saying that how you can essentially say things that you can't say. There was, famously a lot of, especially the 19th century, a lot of Northern European opera was using mythological stories note for note in order to, speak about what they thought they were being persecuted by their governments. And it's just another show of that you have to use, technically speaking, fiction to get almost any point across, and you can really find, like V for Vendetta style, I guess, not that extreme, but People, people, people will, if you build it, they will come eventually.
Yeah, so you made me think of Wagner, who I feel like was simultaneously doing what you're describing, but
Mm,
also co-opted by the very system of the whole Nazi system.
right.
And so he was sort of like, he's classically somebody who may have been misunderstood. His message may have been turned upside down, even. I'm not sure if that's the case, but it wouldn't surprise me.
I think that well, I recently, and I've done, plenty of music work on the show here, but and Godzilla too, by the way, which has plenty of things to unravel. My goodness. Um, one of my more recent music miniseries episodes was on Wagner, and it was about how, yeah, misunderstood is a pretty crucial way to describe it for sure. But I don't think meaning was lost, and I think that um, people put aside whatever differences they may have thought they had with his affiliations because the work is so unbelievable in a certain sense, and it's almost too grand for its own good, because we're talking about one of the operas is a 4 part, 15-hour extravaganza.
Oh yeah,
And
it's really, really intense. But the fact that he could get into the imaginations of warring camps the way he did is fascinating.
I agree completely. Yes. Yes. And that music miniseries will end. My fans are waiting. I can't, I essentially have my final YouTube broadcast. And I know you have a YouTube. You can put this on YouTube. I have nothing wrong with that. I personally haven't had the return on it, and I'm feeling like I don't want to really have Google in my life anymore. So I'm beginning by removing YouTube stuff, and I wasn't going to finish the music miniseries there. It's getting too hot and heavy for a lot of reasons, which you may be able to guess.
Yes, I can guess.
Yes,
I mean, I've really been happy doing interviews and lives over on Substack. They've created
right,
a very nice environment and, have had, quite a few people showing up in the lives and then
great,
watching the recordings. So there's definitely some there.
awesome. That's great to hear. Yeah, Substack is really great. Patreon's fine, but they recently changed their payment structure where you're just getting much less, and that doesn't feel right to just kind of pull the rug there. And I don't think it's as well. I know it's not nearly as engaging as Substack, but I also don't get the same. I almost get the warm fuzzy feeling from Substack, and I definitely don't get that from Patreon. So I'm
Definitely not. Yeah, Substack is still in that honeymoon phase,
yes,
with everybody, and I hope it lasts a lot longer because it's been wonderful to be in a kind of social media environment without all the assholes. I mean,
yeah,
just pardon my French, but
no, no. For
it's been
now, it's
amazing.
yeah, yeah. It's it's a miracle. It's a miracle at this point, in my opinion. Um, it really is. I had a thing here to ask about your writing process, but maybe before we even get there, because I have a feeling this is not going to be a two part. We'll just kind of pass through and finish it out. If you want a quick break, though, it won't be an issue. You had said you were on a block or doing something before you changed your mic. What do you want to describe what you were doing to the audience? I'm curious.
Yeah, I've since gotten off of the block, but it's a kind of a wooden yoga block like
Mm,
thing, but it's got different design elements that allow you to do things like stand on it, and it's designed to basically compress your fascia against the bone in a certain way to release adhesions and
wow.
create more blood and lymph flow, more oxygenation, ability to detox, give you more flexibility, and help with pain and that kind of thing. It's part of something that I created called pragmalchemy, which you can find on my Substack. So for the first 30 minutes or so of our conversation, I was just standing on this Ouroboros, which is an old word for the self-consuming or self-generating serpent of alchemy.
Right. That is there a specific name for this wooden stand? This block?
Yeah, the Ouroboros. I called it the
Oh, is that what it's
Ouroboros.
called? Oh, okay.
Mhm. Yeah, so if you go to saulluckman.substack.com and then go into the menu bar, there's pragmalchemy, and then you can read about pragmalchemy and the Ouroboros right there.
Wow.
That's very cool. You can lie on it. You can put it on your kind of your navel, your solar plexus area. And there's the way I'm teaching is you're combining breath work, body work, and visualization to do certain things at the physical level, but also at the energetic level.
That
Um,
is
and so
awesome.
and so when you put it on your belly area and you lie on it for at
Right.
least 3 minutes and let your full weight come down, that can be very tender because you're in the psoas area, right?
Right.
But then it can release a lot of the tightness in the psoas, which is responsible for so many structural problems and aches and pains. It can be
Wow.
really amazing just to experience that one move.
That sounds incredible. I mean, how could this be bad? How could something like that be bad? I'm loving it. I think my wife would love it too, by the way. Definitely interested. Wow. Cool. Cool. That's so cool. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Um,
Yeah, yeah. It's just one of the little things that I do, but it's related to the inner alchemy that I'm writing about in Get Out of Here Alive. So,
right. I see. I see. Yeah, that well, potentially that'll be the first book I check out of yours. I'm very interested. Um, so I maybe we can just sort of swoop in quickly back around to I was going to ask about symbology versus the written word. Maybe we'll hold that for a moment. Do you feel like poetry is getting less musical overall as far as, rhythmically speaking? And do you think that all these AI voices that people are hearing are going to have a broader effect on it over time with their very inhuman rhythms?
yeah, I tend to think that the AI will get more and more human sounding. Uh,
Good point.
I don't.
Good point.
I have written that I don't believe that the concept of a artificial general intelligence is a reality or a possibility. I don't think that's how it works.
Right.
So even if they announce that they have it and it seems that like it's really advanced, it's probably still just really fancy programming and
Yep.
it's basically processing things like a computer, not like a person. So, I'm sorry if that disappoints any futurists out there, but that's my opinion. But yeah, I think there's definitely we're at an inflection point with writing in general with AI, and that could have all kinds of impacts on prose as well as poetry. I don't really know enough about the state of a lot of contemporary poetry to know if it's shifting in response to AI. It's not even been that long
Right.
yet. So, time will tell, I suppose.
Sure, sure. Yeah, that was obviously people got aware of it after The Matrix came out in 99, but I was so surprised how many people had never heard of this concept of artificial intelligence. And me being, very avid video game player at the time, I think that I was person like me was more aware of it, I guess. because they were, marketing games even in the mid 90s. Like artificial intelligence will read how you play and react to and make the game more challenging. So it's this, and that, if they were saying that then on these, cheap cartridge based systems back then, I'm sure it's going back a little further. I mean, machine learning is not new, and binary can do things, but it's never going to be, it's never going to have the soul, right?
Well, a lot of exactly, and that's the whole point, really.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
wanted
I
to go
know.
back to what I was going to say because that was the point I was going to make. So you made it for me.
Oh, great. Well, yeah, soul is it has one of two. It's never going to have the third. And I made a point about this on several occasions throughout the show, throughout interviews with other people, that even the very stereotypical modern thing, you pick up a guitar, you can play some power chords if you're familiar with what this is, versus a full actual chord. The power chord has two of the three notes of the triad of a typical chord, and you get the root and the fifth, which is a very mechanical, empty, hollow sounding thing. It's missing the third. The third is what designates whether or not it's major or minor, male or female, and it's very machine oriented, in my opinion. So even that silly
Makes
little
sense.
thing, you know. But what did you say? I'm sorry.
I said that makes sense.
Yeah, it's very, and it acts more like a binary unit at the same time, like a chord. My idea of a chord the first time I played an instrument, I was like, oh, there's two notes. It's cool. I could do anything with these two notes. But I knew something was missing. Like, there's no way this is. I'm not getting the beautiful sounding melodies that I want. Um, let me see. Let me see. Oh, okay. Actually, before I ask this, so if you want to, if it ends up turning into something, do you have any opinion about that concept of relating information with symbols versus relating them with written words, which may easily just not be taken in the correct context or turn into mimetic desire?
Well, they can both turn into mimetic desire. It's not just words.
Agreed.
But I have been exposed to certain pieces of art and even books that don't have words. The most famous one, or the one that I know the best, and that it's a fairly small category, so
Yeah.
you don't have a lot of these, but it's Franz Mazzarell's A Passionate Journey from the 1930s, probably, and it's a sort of a German style book of woodcuts that tells the story of a man's life, and it goes through his life stages and his heartbreaks and his tragedies and his triumphs, and it goes all the way through it ultimately to his death and resurrection. And it's all told just in images. There are no words in the whole story, and it's one of the most powerful things you'll ever experience if you just let yourself go there.
Wow. I will. I plan to, and I certainly will. I haven't heard of that actually. I may have come across it and never went all the way with it. So I gotta look back at this. This is great. I'm writing out some fun stuff here for myself. I
Yeah,
appreciate
well,
the
that was very inspirational for beginners, Luke. And in fact, when I had some early copies of the parts of this book that's it's divided into six parts. I
yeah.
used Mazzarell's images as the cover art for these sections.
Oh, cool. Nice. Oh yeah, well, I'll definitely be checking it out. Um, I think, I was gonna make a point about a lot of people seem to be under the impression that there's no point in them advancing themselves spiritually. Sure, that's easy to fight off if you watch TV all day. But just as to name my own show, to edify themselves on just about anything. People seem to think like it's all been done already. The answers are on YouTube. The scientists and scholars have done it all. What's the point? I'm just going to work my cubicle job. We're just floating around in the middle of space anyway. We're just, space monkeys on a spinning rock, and it means nothing. And I don't think we have time to get into that whole thing today. But
It's a good
it's,
album title, though.
hey, at least for a 4 song album, maybe not a whole album. I'm going.
Yeah, we need to just do an EP,
Yeah,
so
it's an EP. Yeah, yeah. But more importantly, I mean, is each one of these books a little file waiting to find their way on our desktop, or is everyone's desktop way too cluttered? Because I have had many, especially back in the day. Like I said, I've been gigging and teaching since the 20th century, so I've been around a drug or two, and I've had some very good experiences with psilocybin and Amanita muscaria mushrooms. Thankfully, they were all done very safely, except for maybe one or two times. And I I described, somebody said, why should I even bother? And I said, I believe that it absolutely made it cleared my desktop off, and I was able to start fresh the next day. Um, I don't liken us to computers, and I also don't want to make any futurists mad, or maybe I do. It's not the way. We are not computers, even though you can relate them to the way our brains may function, where even brain people don't know why we see and memorize three different ways and all that stuff.
Mm.
Um, but there is something to be said for that. Everything gets stored, and the more we store, it's the point I'm getting at is that if we do indeed take in enough information, perhaps we'll have better defenses against mimetic desires. And perhaps we'll be able to finally pull from that book you read when you were 10 and didn't even know why it attracted you then, but you forgot all about it. But then it was able to give you a defense mechanism against something that was not good for you because you can think differently because of this old book. I don't even know if I asked that correctly. I'm just going for it with this one.
Hmm. At the risk of trying you and your audience, let me just offer you another quote. This is from
Mhm.
Callie, and it's just on this subject. We're kind of on the same wavelength. So this is about the archons. This book is a fictional retelling of John Lam Lash's uh, scenario called the fallen goddess scenario that he writes about in Not in His Image. So it's this
Mhm.
deeply Gnostic text about the idea that the earth is our mother, literally, and it
Mhm.
is the goddess, literally. So my main character, Callie, is a it's a dis it's a dystopian book happening in the future, and it does not end on that note, but it is very intense for a long time. And she is a huge pop or rock star in that era. So it's all about a musician. And in this conversation, she's speaking with her grandmother. And the grandmother is a very powerful, wise woman who tells her that they're talking about the archons, which is a Gnostic concept
Mhm.
here. And she says that the Illuminati are the willing terrestrial servants of the Lord Archon, who demands everything from various things that we can't really talk about on YouTube to war and chaos as offerings that create loosh. And Callie says, never heard of it. So this is back to this loosh thing, right?
Yeah.
That a lot of people are in complete denial of. And then the grandmother says, loosh is a hyperdimensional energy given off by the human soul when traumatized. The archons parasitically feed on it. Think of it as their simulacrum of Kundalini. Why is seemingly everything the archons do counterfeit? Because they lack the capacity to create anything truly original. In their insane jealousy, they can only mimic the divinely instilled creative capacity of the anthropos.
Mm.
So, are the Illuminati still technically even human? That is a probing question. If the definition of a human is a child of the goddess in possession of an immortal soul and the ability to invent, the answer would most certainly be no. Don't the Illuminati realize they're just pawns in someone else's game? Even if they realize this, I will wager they are beyond caring. They have been completely integrated into the AI, the artificial intelligence, another term for the archontic hive mind. It is a binary operating system that imitates the many shades of gray characteristic of human intelligence, only to end up a circumscribed parody of it that processes everything strictly in terms of black and white. Good versus evil, man versus woman, rich versus poor, east versus west, liberal versus conservative. Take your pick. Anytime you see dichotomies that ignore the human experiment's infinite nuances, you can be certain you are encountering the archontic mind.
I'm loving this term archontic hive mind. That's definitely worth it. We have a guest on this show two times. Slick Dissident. If you don't know, I'm gonna make sure you guys meet. I think you'd have a lot to talk about. He would
Cool.
just love this phrase. He would research it for 2 weeks, 2 months, I should say. He's an
Yeah.
all-in kind of guy.
Yeah. Cool. Cool. Well, and then, I'm
That
sure
is
you have a lot of perspectives on that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I I am aware of the demiurge. The problem is animating or giving a soul to the to what he can create. Is this the reference of that?
Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. And in even the idea of the soul is something that I probe in this work on inner alchemy. And my position, which was also John Keats's position, by the way, the great English poet, is that souls do not pre-exist this place. We come here to make souls.
Mm,
When we individuate, then we create our soul. And if we become powerful enough, we can actually matriculate and get out of the matrix alive. Thus, my title, Get Out of
there's
Here.
the title. And you don't have to pay for a degree for this matriculation? Very
Oh, you
nice.
pay, believe me,
Oh,
you
I know.
pay.
I know. Yeah, I did an episode in
Because this is
Business
a
School.
school of hard knocks, bro.
Yes, it really do have to have, the idea of not having to have your wits about you at all times, your awareness, and to sense things as much as you possibly can. People's spiritual defenses are very often down, and you can tell in the way that just in the way that they interact with people in public. They seem to be so carefree and freewheeling, and I love that, but there doesn't seem to be a place for it now, because of the concept you mentioned. You're whether it's trauma or not, there's a constant need for your energy, and there's something that fiction has been talking about quite a lot, especially in kids movie. What they call them kids movies. They're not always kids movies. Even something as harmless as Hocus Pocus is very it's very focused on making sure that children are harvested, essentially.
Oh,
And
it's over
that's
and over. Monsters Inc. I mean,
yeah,
just
Monsters Inc.
so many different shows that delve into this same thematic.
Right? Yeah, there's no question about that. And that's the point of this, a conversation like this is that I anyone that's going to see this, whether a fan of yours or mine, I don't think that they're completely unaware of this, but the way we're discussing it will potentially give them one more opportunity to say to themselves, I really have to be, aware of this. And I need to worry about these things a little bit. Not, it's not about fear mongering either. That you have to, there's a loose, a demon looking to to steal your energy around every corner. But it's it's worse off if you're not aware. It's worse off if you're not paying attention to your feelings and, allowing the sky to tell you what it's trying to tell you. It just happens so often. And I didn't actually, speaking of career parent, I didn't actually, there's certain things where the anomalies that occur in the sky, retrograde things, eclipses, whatever you want to name, they're very subtle sometimes. But this one time, maybe it was 2 years ago, there was an eclipse in Australia. And funny enough, I woke up my wife like, look, the eclipse is happening. She said, I'd much rather go outside and look at this. I'm like, no, 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 it's midnight. This is the sun. It's in Australia. But that night, for the first and last time ever, my dog, my two kids at the time, there's another one now, she's pretty young, and my wife and me all ended up falling asleep in a completely different object in a different room. And it's never happened before. It's just one of those things where you may not have been aware, but it happened. And getting, a heightened ability to be aware of these things, much like you can be more of that in a dream, let's say in a dream state, or again on, let's say mushrooms or something. You have this new old ability to tap into all of the energies that you absolutely cannot see. And this is a call to awareness, if anything else. Forget about books.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I definitely don't recommend that people go around and use the word worry. If anything, the what I'm sharing is to, gird up the spiritual loins so that you don't have to worry. You're just prepared and you're knowledgeable. You have a gnosis and you have the ability to discern and to feel energy and to feel when something isn't right and then to walk away. It's like I shared a meme after an experience that I recently had, and the meme has this wise man, kind of an Indian guru, sitting up in front of his students on top of a little pedestal, and he's saying, and then I said, "Fuck all that," and all that fucked off, and I was at peace.
Well said. And a more poignant point cannot be made. It's crucial. I personally have many times been called a yes man, and maybe I was. I was in a position where, as a musician, if I didn't say yes to every single tiny little piece of work, no matter how inconvenient, I had no hope of financially making it. It's just the way it was, especially on Long Island, New York, if anyone knows.
Mm.
It's fantasy island, you pretend you can live there. And especially doing what I was doing. And, you know, once you have family, you can't necessarily be rehearsing all the time or having these, getting home at 1 a.m. gigs. You can if the money's right, sure. And the money was right sometimes, but not that often. I I
Mm.
may have received this quality from that nature of work, telling myself if I don't do everything, I'll never get everything. And that it opens you up. It deactivates the firewall almost eternally.
Mm.
And
Mm.
then anything that wants to come in can. And there's nothing good about that. Well, for the
The
most part.
Agreed, agreed. I mean, I think the idea of being in the world but not of it applies here, where you can still function and thrive in the matrix, but you can walk between the raindrops when doing so.
Mm, very nice. Yeah, just saying no. The word when you're young is the last thing you want to hear, obviously, but you got to learn something at some point from a parent, right? But as long as it's not that you have to go to college and get a career, if you can take the route. I did too. I have a music degree. Um, but saying no for yourself so that somebody can understand that you have boundaries and you have needs and you know, you have a sense that maybe this isn't right for me. It's incredible. It's super powerful in a strange way.
Oh, I totally agree.
Yeah. And it allows you to open yourself up to the things that you want. And it doesn't happen until you do, ever. It'll never, even though I was doing the thing that I was doing, I was completely restricted. And the students that I had over 50 students a week at some point, and I assure you that less than 10% were successfully practicing what I was asking them to. And I'm sure anyone can tell you that's how it goes with most things. But I would tell the parents, I don't think there's any reason to really continue these lessons at this point. We're doing the same page in the book 4 weeks, 5 weeks in a row. Or the song I asked them to learn has been the last thing on their mind. And said, but he really likes you, and we'll see you next week. I'm like, yeah, all right, I'll see you next week. I wasn't going to say no. And because it was an income thing, it was
Of
also
course.
like they're psychologists, psychiatrists at the same time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I suppose there's nothing wrong with that. You weren't necessarily, doing anything dishonest. You were
Right.
just, it would have been nice to be in a more fulfilling teaching environment. And I was a teacher. I get where you're coming from. And I also did some private tutoring and
Mhm.
had some of the same exact experiences that you're describing.
For sure. And I started my own little bass player university to do exactly what I wanted to do with no question. Learn this song, do this thing. Here's the test. And it was more, but it was a group environment because with one-on-one, people get very comfy. And then I would have to do the sunglasses test. I would say, okay, just leave the room. Like, well, why? Just leave the room. And then they come back and I'm wearing sunglasses. I'm a whole different person now. And now they're like, oh, I'm stumbling. I can't play right. They don't have the comfort that they have. But
Hmm.
but some of them actually came out of it saying, you know what, I actually played better because I'm so just like, they're hanging out with me. This is how they're playing. The sunglass dude is how they're playing. You know. And yeah, there's something to be said for that too. The group versus the one-on-one. And I've had students for almost a decade, so that's where the comfort level does step in. I am their friend, and that's just the way it is. But yeah, you're right. It's not nothing deceptive ever happened. I've never taken a student just because if it's not working. It's I say it right away to the parent.
Yeah, that's cool. I love the sunglasses test.
Um, I have a feeling we could keep going here with lots of things, but I personally did, relatively speaking, cover the things I wanted. You got to say some things that I was very happy to hear, things I didn't even think about. I got some insight into what you're all about, and maybe some more about what your books are all about. And you already essentially, it seems like you have an early, middle, and late period as far as up to right now. Is this accurate? It's pretty cool.
I guess I do. I'm not exactly sure what the demarcations are, but it
Right.
kind of feels like that. I'm going for like a late period
Yeah,
too.
you want late, late. Yeah, yeah. I want a late, late period too. I really do because I have a very anonymous repertoire regarding what I've done as a bass player. It's like you need tracks. Yeah, great. Oh, that was awesome. Okay, well, I'll see you never. And that's where it ends. You're supposed to be anonymous as a bass player, in my opinion. It's just the way it goes. If they ask me to solo, fine, but that's not what I'm there for. You know, I'm here to support mechanism, and art can be that too. Art can be a support mechanism, and I'll make a final point here. I started recording a little less about a year ago. I was hot for one a week at least, and then and once the my third was born, and there's two other older teens that are the stepkids that are pretty amazing, and I didn't have it just I didn't find the opportunity. It wasn't the same level of opportunities for me to press record all the time, and I went almost 2 weeks once, which I'd never done. And my wife said, I think people just want they just want to hear you talk. Just record. It doesn't matter. And I stopped being so worried about everything. And those kinds of moments that can be inspiring if you have the right partner, just like that. But the concept of art in any form, it can be a I don't want to call it a crutch, because after studying or earlier, like American literature, Wayland, Shepard Lee, I I realized that yes, there's a lot of crutches in writing and art. There's a lot of crutches in endings, especially Hollywood movies, but they're there when you need them. Maybe we can't walk at full capacity at all times, and somebody like yourself, especially just frequently posting on Substack, it's a place to go to, where it used to be, oh, my favorite TV show's on Wednesday nights. Those days are over. So the new era is coming in, and you're a humongous part of pushing just what it's all about. And I respect that. I'm really glad you came here today to have this conversation, and I appreciate it. If you have any final words, let it out. If you have anything that you want to just spill it all, where to find you, the places that you prefer to be found, if you have a mail list, anything like that, let us know, please.
Well, I do appreciate that. And thank you for having me again. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And I won't say it exceeded my expectations because I really didn't have any, to be honest. But it was really fun. And I wanted to just point out that you could do exactly what you were describing on Substack by just hitting the live button and going live at the drop of a hat. And anybody out there in your following will see that and then can come and just hear what you're doing. So it's a wonderful place to be, super impromptu, and not have a lot of pressure to perform or to have a regular schedule. So just putting that out there.
It's great. Thanks.
And yeah, so I'm at saulluckman.substack.com. That's my main hub. You can subscribe for free. There's a paid membership option. I'm doing a Black Friday special right now. So if you listen to this before the end of Cyber Monday, then you can save on basically experiencing my life's work, which is on my Substack.
It's great. That's great. Yeah, I hope everyone that knows me on Substack will find you there. And I thank you, and I hope that
George,
not
would you give your Substack address in case, for people listening to this from on my platform so that they can find you on Substack?
of course, thank you very much. Third Eye Edify is my Substack, and it's the same for the website. And when you type it, there's two E's in a row at I
Hmm.
Edify. So just watch for that. It looks weird on a web address.
That's right.
So yes, third Eye Edify, as the shirt implies, and that's where you'll find me for sure. And just about everything I do is there, as a matter of fact. And I just I feel a passion to do this. I cover a whole slew of different topics, but I'm going to be more focused on music again very soon, because I didn't finish my thought on my 400-year journey of the advent of Western tonality and how it affected cultures, and how it essentially turned into the 20th century, in my opinion. So I look forward to finishing that, and I look forward to checking out a lot more of your work.
Well, if you know anything that would be relevant to Miguel Connor's work, he wrote the Occult Elvis, and his new book that's going to be coming out before terribly long is on the esoteric Bowie or the Gnostic Bowie. So it's going to be very fascinating. And so the Occult Elvis had it was sort of looking at him as a kind of trickster shamanic archetype,
Mm,
someone who'd been to the crossroads and all of that in his
right.
own way. And so, so you could be a guest perhaps on Miguel's channel. You can reach out to him, or I can put you in contact because that might be an interesting conversation to have.
Oh yeah, I'd appreciate it. Is he on Substack also?
Yes, he's
Okay,
got
great.
the Aeon Byte YouTube channel as
Oh,
well.
Aeon Byte. Yes, I've absolutely seen. I was on Rockfin for a bit too. I think he was there, and I've noticed his. I've never checked it out, but I've seen his that exact name, and maybe his logo will ring a bell when I see it too. So I'm looking
Yeah,
forward
yeah.
to that
So
next.
it seems like a natural fit, and he interviews all kinds of people, but it seems like you would have a lot to contribute to his channel. That's just my opinion.
That sounds great. I appreciate it.
Well, this was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you again for being here, and thank you everyone out there for hanging out with us and checking it out. And absolutely do check out his Substack, please. I think he's got a lot to say, and it's worth checking out. All right, man. We'll see you next time.
All
And
right.
Saul, I'll talk
Cheers.
to you soon.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, let's do it again.
All right, that sounds great. Thanks a lot.